What happened to the African American breakfasts that once started mornings with strength and comfort, carrying tradition with every bite? These breakfasts, often born from the humble kitchens of the South, were more than just food. They were woven with memories, resilience, and a deep connection to the land. They emerged from gardens, cast-iron skillets, and family tables, each dish a reflection of a time when creativity, thrift, and resourcefulness were essential to survival. When we stop cooking them, do we lose more than food? Do we lose a part of our history, our heritage, and the stories that have shaped us? Sweet potato coffee cake was one of those breakfasts that carried the warmth and spirit of African American kitchens. Families would mash leftover sweet potatoes into a rich batter, often seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and sometimes a pinch of cloves. The mixture was baked in heavy cast-iron skillets, which ensured a perfect, crispy crust on the outside and a soft, moist center. The natural sweetness of the sweet potatoes, rather than refined sugar, made the cake a nourishing start to the day. It wasn't just a breakfast item, it was a symbol of ingenuity, stretching a simple root vegetable into something memorable. This cake was often shared at church gatherings or Sunday breakfast when something a little extra was needed to bring the family and community together. A humble yet heartfelt creation, it reflected African American traditions of making the most of what was available, turning simplicity into something special. Paired with a hot cup of coffee, milk, or even molasses drinks, it provided the kind of comfort that made mornings feel warm and connected, even in times of hardship. While it's rarely baked today, sweet potato coffee cake once played a vital role in sustaining generations, leaving behind a legacy of warmth, family, and resilience with each bite. Molasses milk was another simple yet profoundly impactful breakfast drink that could fill an empty stomach and provide the energy needed to start the day. A mug of warm milk would be stirred with a spoonful of thick, dark blackstrap molasses until the drink became rich and sweet. For families who could not afford the luxury of refined sugar, molasses was an affordable, nutritious alternative. Packed with iron, calcium, and essential minerals, molasses provided nourishment, making this drink an important part of many breakfasts. Children would drink it before school, while adults relied on it as a quick and hearty boost before heading out to the fields, factories, or wherever their work awaited. The deep, lingering sweetness of molasses offered more than just flavor. It gave a sense of fullness, comfort, and strength that no ordinary glass of milk could. This drink was a practical solution to stretching limited resources, but it was also a labor of love, a way to care for a family with creativity and heart. While molasses milk has long since disappeared from most breakfast tables, it remains a beautiful reminder of the ways families once made the most of what they had. Cornmeal mush with sorghum syrup was another beloved breakfast staple rooted in the resourcefulness that defined African American cooking traditions in the South. Cornmeal, a staple crop of the region, was slowly cooked with water or milk until it thickened into a smooth, creamy porridge. On its own, cornmeal mush was filling but rather plain, so families would drizzle sorghum syrup over the top, adding sweetness and richness without relying on expensive sugar. Sorghum, a dark amber syrup, was a staple in the South, tied to the rhythms of farm life and used widely as a more affordable alternative to refined sugar. Cornmeal mush with sorghum syrup was more than just a breakfast. It was a way to stretch limited supplies into a hearty meal that could feed the whole family. Sometimes the mush was allowed to cool and solidify in pans before being sliced and fried into crispy griddle cakes. It was a versatile dish eaten hot at the table with a spoon or prepared in advance for a quick meal. This meal was both a symbol of practicality and a source of comfort, providing warmth and sustenance during long, hard days of work. Today, cornmeal mush with sorghum syrup may no longer grace many tables, but it once offered nourishment, comfort, and a deep connection to the land. Hog's head hash, a breakfast that might sound foreign today, was another testament to African American ingenuity and the no-waste mentality that governed the kitchens of families living in both the South and beyond. When a hog was butchered, nothing went unused. The head, often considered one of the most flavorful parts, would be stewed, chopped, and combined with potatoes, onions, and sometimes peppers before being fried in a skillet until golden and crispy. The flavor was smoky, savory, and robust, filling the house with a mouth-watering aroma that lingered long after the meal. It was a dish that celebrated resourcefulness and respect for food, ensuring that nothing went to waste. Children grew up eating it without complaint, enjoying its hearty flavor and the sense of fullness it provided. For adults, it was a way to honor the hog and ensure that every part of the animal was put to good use. Though hog's head hash is rarely seen in kitchens today, it remains an important symbol of resilience, respect for tradition, and the practical wisdom that defined African American cooking. Okra fritters were another classic breakfast dish that reflected the agricultural roots of African American communities. Okra, one of the most iconic crops of southern gardens, would be chopped and mixed with cornmeal, then fried into small, golden fritters. Crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, these fritters were filled with the earthy, savory flavor of okra, and they could be eaten on their own with a drizzle of cane syrup or alongside eggs for a more substantial meal. Okra fritters were a versatile and affordable way to start the day, making use of what the garden provided in abundance. They were both practical and satisfying, offering a filling breakfast before the long day's work. Today, the fritter form of okra has nearly disappeared, but its memory lingers as a symbol of resourcefulness, thrift, and the deep connection between African American cooking and the land. Cane syrup biscuits, a breakfast treat that balanced simplicity with comfort, was another treasured tradition. Flaky, tender biscuits would be freshly baked or prepared from canned dough and then generously drizzled with thick, dark cane syrup. The syrup itself, rich and sweet, was a pantry staple for many families, often stored in large tins to be used sparingly over the course of weeks. The combination of warm, buttery biscuits and syrup created a breakfast that felt like a treat, even when times were tough. Cane syrup biscuits were not just a meal, they were a reminder of family kitchens, of times when food brought comfort and joy, even in the leanest of times. Today, the sight of cane syrup biscuits on a breakfast table is rare, but their legacy lives on in the hearts of those who remember the simplicity and warmth they offered. Fried catfish and cornbread, though unconventional by today's standards for breakfast, was a classic Southern morning meal that reflected the abundance of rivers and the fishing traditions of African American families. Fresh catfish, caught at little cost, was coated in cornmeal and fried in cast iron skillets until crispy and golden. Paired with cornbread, warm, soft, and comforting, this meal provided both nourishment and energy for the long day ahead. Often prepared on weekends when fishing provided enough for families to share, fried catfish and cornbread became a communal breakfast, a way to bring neighbors together. The combination of crunchy fish and soft cornbread was a simple, hearty meal that stood as a testament to the resourcefulness and community spirit of African American kitchens. Though the tradition of fried catfish for breakfast has faded, it remains a powerful reflection of the resilience and creativity that sustained generations. Collard green omelet was a breakfast born from thrift and the age-old habit of stretching yesterday's leftovers into something new and nourishing. Collard greens, often cooked slowly the day before with rich seasoning and sometimes smoked meats, would be tucked into eggs the following morning, creating a dish that was both frugal and flavorful. Families valued this breakfast because it made the most of what was already available, ensuring nothing went to waste. The tender greens, with their earthy, slightly bitter flavor, balanced beautifully with the fluffy eggs, offering a satisfying combination of nutrition and comfort. For children, it was a familiar flavor carried over into a new form, a way of repurposing yesterday's dinner into a fresh, hearty breakfast. Adults enjoyed the dish because it didn't require expensive meats, yet still provided the kind of fullness that would carry them through a busy day. This meal tied breakfast to dinner, creating a seamless rhythm in the household kitchen where ingredients were used to their fullest, turning leftovers into something that felt special. While the convenience of processed foods might have become the norm in many kitchens, African American homes thrived on this kind of ingenuity, transforming simple meals into something that felt both sustaining and resourceful. Today, collard green omelets are rare, but they once carried the quiet wisdom of making much from little, starting the morning strong and in the spirit of tradition. Red gravy with rice was a breakfast dish that reflected the harmony between economy and comfort in African American homes. This savory gravy, made from tomatoes, onions, and various seasonings, would simmer until thickened and poured over steaming rice. It was simple, affordable, and deeply satisfying, providing the warmth and energy needed to carry families through their day. Rice, a staple that was often cheaper than bread, could easily be stretched to feed the entire family, while tomatoes added both flavor and color to the dish. Red gravy with rice was commonly served across the South, where it became a daily breakfast for working families who needed a hearty, reliable meal before long hours of labor. Children grew up with it, enjoying the comforting, familiar flavors, while adults appreciated the ease of preparation and the dependable sustenance it provided. Though it was never considered a fancy dish, red gravy with rice symbolized the resilience and resourcefulness of African American kitchens, where simple ingredients were transformed into something meaningful. Today, this humble breakfast may be less common, but it once stood proudly as a staple of Southern cooking, a meal that spoke to both practicality and tradition. Cornbread and buttermilk bowl was one of the simplest yet most enduring breakfasts in African American households. Leftover cornbread would be crumbled into a bowl and covered with cold buttermilk, which would soak into the bread, softening it into a comforting, tangy porridge. This dish was quick to prepare, making it a perfect choice for mornings when time and money were both in short supply. Families appreciated it because it made use of ingredients they already had on hand, stretching resources without the need for extra purchases. Cornbread and buttermilk bowls were especially refreshing in the summer heat, when the cold buttermilk provided a cooling contrast to the warmth of the cornbread. For adults, the hearty meal lasted long into the day, providing energy and fullness. This breakfast reflected the agricultural roots of many African American communities, where corn and dairy were staples in the pantry. The dish required no special preparation, only the wisdom of turning leftovers into something nourishing and practical. While cornbread and buttermilk bowls may rarely be seen today, they once served as a comforting reminder of simplicity, tradition, and the resourcefulness that defined generations of Southern families. Souse meat with eggs was a breakfast that reflected the African American tradition of turning preservation into sustenance. Souse meat, made by boiling pig parts, often less desirable cuts, until they were tender and then seasoning them to perfection, was allowed to cool and set into a gelatinous loaf. This loaf was then sliced and fried in a skillet until crispy on the edges, creating a hearty, savory dish. When paired with eggs, it formed a filling, protein-rich meal that was affordable for working families. The rich, vinegary flavor of the souse meat, balanced with the earthy taste of the eggs, made for a robust breakfast that could carry a family through the day's challenges. For children, the texture of souse meat might have been unusual, but it was a familiar comfort to those who grew up with it as a routine part of the household. Adults valued its practicality, using the less desirable cuts of meat, which could be preserved and turned into a filling dish, was both economical and efficient. Though souse meat with eggs has faded from many breakfast tables, it once symbolized resilience, creativity, and the ability to make the most of every part of the animal. It was a meal that reflected both tradition and the unyielding resourcefulness of African American kitchens. Field pea cakes were a breakfast dish that beautifully combined creativity with frugality. Leftover field peas would be mashed and mixed with cornmeal, onions, and seasonings, then shaped into small patties and fried until golden and crispy. These cakes were simple to prepare but hearty enough to satisfy the hunger of a working family. For farming families, field peas were easy to grow and store, making them a reliable and affordable staple. The patties could be eaten on their own, paired with bread or syrup, or enjoyed alongside a bit of bacon or eggs when available. The texture was soft inside, with a crispy outer crust that made them appealing to both children and adults. Field pea cakes were a testament to the ingenuity of African American cooks who made sure that no food went to waste. What was once a leftover from the previous day could be transformed into a new, delicious breakfast. They were both frugal and flavorful, proving that even the simplest ingredients could be turned into a breakfast that brought satisfaction and joy. Fried grits cakes were a practical, resourceful breakfast that turned leftover grits into a completely new and delicious dish. Grits, a Southern staple, would be cooked thick and poured into a pan to chill overnight. The next morning, the chilled grits would be sliced into squares or rounds and fried in a skillet until golden and crispy on the outside, while remaining soft and creamy inside. The resulting cakes were hearty and comforting, with a satisfying combination of crunchy exterior and creamy interior. Fried grits cakes could be enjoyed in a variety of ways, served with syrup for a touch of sweetness, paired with eggs for balance, or topped with gravy for extra richness. This dish was a perfect example of the no-waste mentality that was central to African American cooking, where even leftovers were transformed into something delicious and satisfying. Grits themselves were inexpensive and reliable, making them a go-to staple in many homes. Fried grits cakes turned what might have been considered a simple side dish into a full breakfast that was both practical and flavorful, keeping families well fed during long, busy days. Hog maw and potatoes was a breakfast that provided both sustenance and comfort, a hearty dish for families who needed energy for the long day ahead. Hog maw, or hog stomach, was carefully cleaned, seasoned, and slow-cooked until tender. Potatoes were added to the pot, soaking up the rich, flavorful broth and spices as they simmered together. The result was a dish that was savory, satisfying, and deeply nourishing, often eaten in large portions to ensure that no one went hungry. While it wasn't a delicacy, hog maw and potatoes was respected as a meal that made use of parts of the hog that might otherwise be discarded. It reflected the resilience and practicality of African American families who ensured that no food went to waste. The combination of meat and potatoes provided both protein and comfort, giving families the strength to face the demands of their workday. Though it is rarely seen on tables today, hog maw and potatoes once provided a hearty, dependable breakfast that brought both tradition and pride to the table. Molasses-dipped apples was a simple but beloved breakfast treat that combined the sweetness of molasses with the natural tartness of apples. The apples would be peeled, sliced, and simmered in thick, dark molasses until they became tender and glossy. The result was a comforting, rich dish that could be enjoyed alongside bread or biscuits for a balanced meal. Molasses, being more affordable and accessible than refined sugar, was a staple in many African American homes, and when paired with apples, often plentiful during the harvest season, created a filling, sweet breakfast. For children, molasses-dipped apples were a rare treat, offering a way to enjoy something sweet without the expense of store-bought sweets. Adults appreciated the simplicity and practicality of the dish, which allowed them to stretch the sweetness into something filling and nourishing. Molasses-dipped apples once stood as a proof of the resourcefulness and creativity that defined African American kitchens, showing how humble ingredients could come together to create comfort and joy. Fish roe and onions was a breakfast plate that reflected the strong connection African American communities had with local rivers and the abundance of fish they provided. Roe sacks, often harvested from catfish or carp, were carefully cleaned, seasoned, and pan-fried in lard or butter until golden and firm. Onions were fried alongside, their sweetness balancing the richness of the roe. The combination was served hot, often with bread or cornbread, creating a hearty, protein-rich meal. While not a glamorous dish, it was reliable and nutritious, providing sustenance for families living close to waterways. Fish roe was a more affordable protein compared to other meats, making it a vital resource for families who relied on what was available from the land and water. Though fish roe and onions may be rarely seen today, this dish once held a respected place at the breakfast table, embodying both practicality and tradition. Liver pudding with cornbread was a meal rooted in both thrift and tradition. Liver pudding, made by grinding pork liver with spices and grains, was sliced and fried until golden and fragrant. Paired with crumbled cornbread, the dish was hearty, filling, and affordable, making it ideal for large families on a tight budget. While the flavor of liver pudding was bold, it was respected for its nutritional value and practicality, ensuring that no part of the hog went to waste. In African American kitchens, dishes like this were common, as families made the most of inexpensive cuts of meat. The combination with cornbread offered comfort and balance, with the soft texture of cornbread complementing the savory richness of the liver pudding. For many, liver pudding with cornbread was a reminder of resilience, creativity, and resourcefulness. Although rarely prepared today, it once carried both pride and practicality, serving as a vital breakfast that kept families going strong. Turtle soup breakfast bowls were a dish born out of necessity, showcasing the creativity and resourcefulness of African American cooks during lean times. When turtles were available from local rivers or swamps, they were cleaned, simmered, and stewed into a thick, rich soup. Vegetables and spices were added when available, stretching the meat into a nourishing broth that could feed an entire family. Turtle soup was often eaten for breakfast, offering warmth and strength to start the day. Turtle meat was prized for its richness, and this dish allowed families to make the most of available resources, turning a once scarce food into a sustaining meal. Though turtle soup might seem unusual by today's standards, it was once a practical and cherished option, especially when other proteins were hard to come by. It symbolized both hardship and resilience, serving as a reminder of how African American communities survived by making the best of every available resource. Turnip green juice with cornbread is one of the most iconic examples of thrift, sustainability, and heritage in African American kitchens. After collard or turnip greens were simmered with seasoning and often pork, the leftover cooking liquid, known as pot liquor, was saved. Instead of discarding it, families would sip the warm, vitamin-packed liquid with crumbled cornbread. Rich in minerals and nutrients, pot liquor provided both strength and comfort at the start of the day, making it an essential part of the morning routine. This was not waste, it was nourishment. The practice of turning leftovers into sustenance was a hallmark of African American cooking, showing how nothing was ever thrown away in kitchens that valued resourcefulness. Children grew up drinking it regularly, while adults appreciated its health benefits and its ability to fill hungry bellies. Turnip green juice with cornbread was more than just food. It was a tradition that symbolized resilience, community, and the deep connection to both family and the land. Chitlin scramble was a breakfast that spoke to the ingenuity and resilience of African American cooking traditions. Chitlins, or pig intestines, were cleaned thoroughly, boiled until tender, and then chopped into small pieces. These were folded into scrambled eggs, often with onions, creating a savory, hearty dish. The sweetness of the onions balanced the richness of the chitlins, and the eggs added a creamy texture that brought the whole dish together. Though chitlins are now often reserved for holiday meals, they were once a staple for many African American families, as they were inexpensive and ensured that no part of the hog was wasted. For farm workers and laborers, a plate of chitlin scramble was a powerful source of strength before long hours of physical labor. The aroma of this dish filled kitchens, evoking memories of both everyday meals and family gatherings. Chitlin scramble was not just food, it was heritage served hot, a dish that was deeply tied to both survival and tradition. Wild berry dumplings were a breakfast that came directly from the land, showcasing the African American tradition of foraging and making the most of nature's bounty. Early in the morning, children would gather wild berries like blackberries, blueberries, or mulberries from the best patches they knew. These berries were simmered into a sweet syrup, and simple dumplings made from flour and water were dropped into the pot to cook. As the dumplings absorbed the berry flavor, they became plump, soft, and comforting. This wasn't a dish you'd find in restaurants. It was the taste of summer mornings in rural communities, made with whatever nature provided and a few basic pantry staples. Families looked forward to wild berry dumplings during berry season, as they were affordable and satisfying. The dish was a blend of sweetness and tradition, and it proved that even foraged food could turn into a feast. The dumplings were often eaten straight from the bowl, sometimes with a splash of milk to make the meal stretch further. Wild berry dumplings were a reminder of the deep connection between the land, food, and community. Rice and molasses porridge was a breakfast that combined comfort with thrift in one simple dish. Leftover rice was slowly simmered with water or milk until it became soft and creamy, and then molasses was stirred in for sweetness. The result was a warm, filling breakfast that provided the energy needed to start the day. Molasses, which was cheaper than refined sugar, added both sweetness and vital nutrients, while rice stretched further than bread, making it an ideal choice for families trying to feed many mouths on a tight budget. The rich, slightly tangy flavor of the molasses paired perfectly with the soft, creamy rice, creating a comforting dish that was both nourishing and affordable. For children, rice and molasses porridge was a taste that evoked memories of home, while for adults it was a reminder of how simple ingredients could provide both comfort and sustenance. Though it has quietly disappeared from many breakfast tables, rice and molasses porridge once left a lasting mark in the hearts of those who grew up with it. Boiled peanuts and cornbread might not sound like a typical breakfast, but in many rural African American kitchens, it was a staple. Peanuts were boiled until soft, seasoned with salt, and served alongside freshly baked or leftover cornbread. The briny peanuts created a hearty snack that doubled as a full meal, providing protein and substance. The combination of boiled peanuts and cornbread was a practical, inexpensive meal that kept large families and farm workers satisfied before heading out to work. The saltiness of the peanuts complemented the soft, comforting cornbread, making it a filling breakfast that could be quickly prepared. Though it may not be as common today, boiled peanuts and cornbread once stood as a symbol of resourcefulness, thrift, and the creativity of turning simple, abundant ingredients into a meal that could sustain families. Dandelion green hash was a breakfast that spoke to the importance of foraging and making the most of what nature provided. Dandelion greens, often overlooked and dismissed as weeds, were gathered fresh from the garden or the wild and sautéed with onions in a skillet until tender. When available, potatoes or eggs were added to stretch the dish into something more substantial, turning it into a complete meal. The greens had a slightly bitter taste, which was perfectly balanced by the sweetness of the onions and the richness of the fat used for cooking, often lard or bacon grease. For families with little money, dandelion green hash was an affordable way to get vital vitamins and nutrients while providing a hot, hearty breakfast to start the day. This dish was a reflection of a deeper connection to the land, passed down from generation to generation, as elders taught the younger ones which wild plants were safe to eat and how to prepare them. Children might not have always loved the bitterness of dandelions, but over time it became part of the rhythm of daily life. Dandelion green hash wasn't just about thrift. It was a living memory of resilience and ways communities made use of the earth's bounty. It was a reminder that sometimes the best food is the simplest, grown from the soil under our feet. Saltfish and Johnny cakes was a breakfast steeped in history, tradition, and cultural fusion. Saltfish, preserved through drying and salting to last for months, was soaked, flaked, and fried until it became tender and flavorful. Paired with Johnny cakes, simple cornmeal-based cakes cooked on a griddle, this meal created a satisfying, filling breakfast. The Johnny cakes were soft and absorbed the rich, salty goodness of the fish, making them the perfect complement. Saltfish, once a staple in African American households, was often used when fresh fish wasn't available, providing necessary protein in a time of limited resources. The Johnny cakes, made from just cornmeal, water, and a bit of fat, were an affordable and filling dish. Together, they became more than just a meal. They were a reflection of the African and Caribbean influences that deeply shaped Southern cuisine. This dish connected families to their heritage, blending practicality with cultural memory. For many, saltfish and Johnny cakes were a vital part of their morning routine, a taste of survival and community. Though it's not as common on the breakfast table today, the dish once carried pride, tradition, and a sense of cultural continuity that sustained families through difficult times. Cabbage and ham hock stew was a breakfast that filled both the stomach and the soul. Cabbage, a vegetable that was both inexpensive and abundant, was simmered with ham hocks until the meat became tender and infused the broth with a smoky, rich flavor. The cabbage absorbed the deep, savory essence of the ham, creating a dish that was both comforting and nourishing. Potatoes, onions, and sometimes other vegetables were added to stretch the stew further, ensuring that it could feed a large family or community without breaking the bank. The beauty of this dish lay in its simplicity. It was a meal that made use of cheaper cuts of meat like ham hocks, which might otherwise be discarded or overlooked. But when slow cooked, those humble cuts transformed into something full of flavor and depth. Cabbage and ham hock stew was a reminder of the ingenuity of African American cooks who learned to bring out the best in even the most basic ingredients. It was a meal that symbolized both strength and resilience, ensuring that no one went hungry. Though it has faded from many breakfast tables today, it once represented the heart of Southern cooking, hearty, filling, and always tied to the traditions of family and survival. Pumpkin cornbread pancakes were a seasonal breakfast that brought the flavors of fall to the table, while also highlighting the importance of harvest traditions. During the harvest season, pumpkins were plentiful and easy to store for the winter months. Pumpkin puree was mixed into cornmeal batter, creating pancakes that were soft, slightly sweet, and spiced with cinnamon, nutmeg, or even cloves when available. These pancakes were cooked on hot griddles, often in heavy cast iron skillets, filling the house with the rich, earthy scent of autumn. They were served with molasses, syrup, or a small dollop of butter, making them both filling and comforting. The beauty of this dish was its simplicity and practicality. Pumpkins were easy to grow, and cornmeal was a pantry staple that stretched the batter further. These pancakes became a cherished fall favorite, especially for children who eagerly looked forward to the sweet, spiced flavor. Pumpkin cornbread pancakes weren't just about breakfast. They were about celebrating the harvest, creating meals that honored the changing seasons and the bounty of the land. They were a reflection of both tradition and thrift, making something festive and memorable from the ingredients at hand. Each bite was a reminder of the resilience and creativity of the kitchen, turning basic, everyday ingredients into something special that warmed the hearts and souls of those who gathered around the table. Pickled pig's feet with rice was a breakfast that blended tang, tradition, thrift, and cultural memory into one hearty meal. Pig's feet, preserved by pickling in vinegar and seasoned with a blend of spices, were a form of preservation that allowed the meat to last long beyond what fresh cuts could offer. Pickled pig's feet were often served cold from jars or warmed gently on the stove, paired with rice to balance the bold tanginess of the meat. For families with limited resources, this dish ensured that every part of the hog was used, demonstrating the African-American nose-to-tail philosophy of resourcefulness and respect for the animal. The pickling process helped preserve the meat when refrigeration wasn't available, and the rice added substance and comfort to the meal, making it filling and affordable. Though the flavor was bold and the texture tough, pickled pig's feet with rice carried deep cultural roots. It was a dish tied to survival, endurance, and the ability to make do with what was available. Though it may no longer be a common breakfast today, it once stood as a cultural marker of thrift, resilience, and the power of community. This dish wasn't just food. It was history, memory, and survival, all served up in a bowl. Fried apple hand pies were a sweet breakfast treat that made mornings feel special without requiring expensive or hard-to-find ingredients. Apples, often in season and abundant, were sliced and spiced with cinnamon or nutmeg, then wrapped in small rounds of dough and sealed tight to keep the juices in. These hand pies were fried until golden brown, their crispy, flaky crusts giving way to hot, bubbling filling that filled the kitchen with a warm, comforting fragrance. The pies were portable, making them perfect for farm workers heading out early or children needing a quick bite on the way to school. Fried apple. Hand pies were the perfect combination of sweetness, convenience, and tradition. They could be made with simple, seasonal ingredients and were a way for families to indulge in something sweet without spending much money. When apples were in season, they were plentiful and inexpensive, making them a natural choice for this treat. Adults appreciated the efficiency and thriftiness of the hand pies, while children delighted in the warm, comforting sweetness they brought. Though simple, these pies carried with them deep tradition and memory, filling homes with the scent of fried dough and spiced apples. Fried apple hand pies were proof that even the humblest ingredients could create joy at the breakfast table, turning ordinary mornings into something special. Which African-American breakfast would you revive? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more forgotten flavors.